If you want to make it more generic, you know your audience better, it could be 7 wealth building rules.
Yeah. Okay.
So I know in your practice, you deal with a lot of landlords and real estate related work. But I don't know if necessarily your listener base is that way. So we can make it more generic. And I could use examples of real estate investors, but it doesn't need to be that specific. It depends on who you think your target market is, but it could just be 7 wealth building rules.
Well, and I know some of my listeners are real estate investors. Some of them are not.
Yeah.
So I think this works. So
do 7 wealth building rules.
Yeah, we can do that.
Cool.
Zoom is recording. So let me start. I'll just start the Audacity as well. Hang on. On this week's episode of the podcast, 7 wealth building rules with Chris Calandra. So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast. My name is Sean Yesner with Yesner Law. I do want to talk a little bit real quick right at the beginning about a new sponsor we have for the show. So this week's show is brought to you by anyreasonloan.com. Do you need $25,000 to $100,000 for any reason? If you or your client has a 680 credit score and you need anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000 for any reason, go to anyreasonloan.com. Fill out the laser lightning fast half-page online application and get an approval in 24 hours. Again, the website is anyreasonloan.com. So now that we got the sponsor out of the way, I do want to give our guest a very quick introduction. So many of you know my guests. Those of you that are longtime listeners know my guest. He is a former sponsor. He is a current and existing supporter of the show. He's with Elliott Wealth Management Services, which has offices in Connecticut and here in Florida. He's a certified financial planner with over 26 years of experience helping entrepreneurs, retirees, and families achieve their financial goals and objectives. He's dedicating to providing each client with the individual attention and tailored strategies to achieve their goals. He's committed to devoting as much time and effort as possible with clients to explain financial concepts, strategies, and investment alternatives in a way that is easily understood, allowing his diverse client base to make informed financial decisions. And I know that from experience because he and I have had many of those different types of conversations. He's the host of the Simply Financial podcast and co-host of the Carnivore radio program, which can be heard throughout Hartford County in Connecticut on 88.1 FM and online at wesufm.org. He's also been involved in real estate investing for 25 years, bought his first investment property at the age of 23, does construction, flipping, residential income properties, commercial income properties, and creative financing with single-family, multifamily, and commercial income-producing properties. He's an investor, a remodeler. He does maintenance. He does reselling. And so all of that is to introduce our guest, our repeat guest, and our friend, Chris Calandra. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much. That was quite the introduction. Oh my goodness gracious.
And I memorized the entire thing.
Wow. I should hire you as my official introductor. Is that such a thing?
Introducer?
Yeah, introducer.
Well, sure. If you're doing speaking engagements, you're welcome to fly me out there. I'll introduce you every time.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. I appreciate being on the show. Big fan of your show. I love the various topics you do. You bring on some really fresh guests. People that you don't find anywhere else. And it's good. And it seems like it's getting better all the time. I know that with my own podcast, we do get better at our craft over time. And hopefully you notice that your show is getting better all the time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's funny because I don't like to listen to my first couple of episodes. I don't know any podcaster that likes to listen to his first couple of episodes.
Sure.
So
yeah, it's I don't like listening to me at all, right? Can you listen to yourself?
I do. I subscribe to my show and I listen every week. And part of that too is to sort of put myself in the mind of the listener as well and see, well, how did I like it? And what did I say? What could I have said better? What could I have done different? And so I do. I subscribe and I listen to my show every Thursday when it comes out.
Yeah, you goose up your own numbers by subscribing?
By one.
Yeah.
My download numbers are off by one download. And I don't even know. I don't think my wife subscribes. I think my parents listen, but I don't know if they subscribe. So maybe one of these days I'll go into like an Apple store and just hit subscribe on all the devices in Apple and see what happens.
There you go. There's a strategy.
There you go. So real quick, I do want to give out your contact information. So C Calandra, Calandra. So CCALANDRA at ElliottWealth.com. And then, of course, the website is ElliottWealth.com. So 7 wealth building rules. I don't know that I necessarily want to get into them in any specific order.
No, go whatever order you'd like.
I do want to talk about a couple of them. I mean, obviously, first, this is the Crushing Debt podcast. So I'm going to start with the last one. Be careful with debt.
Yes. So there's a lot of information out there, especially for your listeners that are real estate investors that really embrace debt. Robert Kiyosaki, for example, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a very influential book.
Yeah.
Influential in my own life too. He's very liberal with the idea of debt. And then on the other end of the extreme, one of the most popular podcasts, we were talking about podcasts, is Dave Ramsey, Total Money Makeover book and podcast. And he doesn't want any debt. He says, if you want to buy a real estate investment property, save up the cash and buy it. He says, if you're a small business owner, you should never borrow money. And so I look at those two extremes. In my experience, neither one of them fully satisfies me. I think you ought to be careful with debt, generally speaking, because number one, too much debt, you could blow yourself up. And you work, I think, in your practice with, unfortunately, people that have to file bankruptcy.
Right.
And often debt, excessive debt, credit cards, student loans, big mortgage payments, they can swamp people if things in their lives don't go well. So you need to be careful with debt. Especially consumer debt, student loans, big car payments, big car loans, and credit card debt is simply a sign that you're living above your means, and you're never going to build wealth if you're living your life above your means. So be careful with consumer debt, but also there are times where debt, I think, is appropriate and is wise. I've used debt in my life, and I would not say that it is automatically terrible. Mortgages on homes is a prime example of that. Small business owners, sometimes it makes sense to borrow. I think you might know this, Sean, is my practice. We've made 3 acquisitions over the last couple of years, and I've used debt to facilitate those purchases. And I'm very comfortable with that, and it's worked out very well. And going to real estate investors, I think it's okay if you're buying properties. If you don't save up $500,000 to buy an apartment building, I think it's okay to borrow money. But I will say, and we'll probably talk about this as we move along, if you are borrowing money, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. There's a difference between somebody that borrows $100,000 for something and they have $1 million of assets, especially liquid assets, to back it up, compared to somebody who borrows $1 million and only has $100,000 of assets.
Right.
Because in that second example, if something goes even a little bit wrong, that person's likely in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and I think the biggest problem that I see with debt, both from the investor end and from the just client end, the people that residential and personal debt rather than business debt, the problem that I see is that it can snowball out of control really quickly, and people can get into this mindset of, well, now that I have this property, I'm going to sell it and I'm going to make X amount of dollars and I'll use that to pay off the debt. But if they don't do their numbers right and
Yes.
they say, I'm going to sell it for, and I'm going to pocket 50 grand, but now they sell it and they only pocket 35 grand. Now they've got this, they've already in their mind, they've already spent that extra 15,000. And now what do they do? And I think that's one of the biggest problems that I see with people that take on, like you said, that take on too much debt.
Take on too much debt. And I think especially in the real estate investor community, especially just a little bit of not respecting the downsides of debt, because so much of the real estate investor community and some of the training and coaching programs out there, I just think they're a little too enthusiastic about debt and don't talk about the other side of the equation to give a fair representation of the pros and cons. And I find that some real estate investors and others as well, sometimes will just be too liberal about the use of debt and they blow themselves up because they get foreclosed on or they can't make the payments. And then they end up being a very motivated seller. And when I'm buying real estate, you know who I want to buy from? A motivated, forced seller, because I'm going to get a good deal. That means that other person is going to end up worse than they originally expected.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in that position. And having your financial house in order and not having too much debt is one way to take care of that. And so in summary, be careful with debt. I'm not Dave Ramsey that says you should pay cash for everything and never borrow money, but I'm also not in a camp that says just borrow as much as you can. As long as you're buying assets, it's okay to borrow money to buy assets. It's more, that's a little too dangerous than I'm comfortable with.
Which is good, considering the sponsor of the show is somebody that wants to make loans to people that need to borrow money.
Yeah, I think that's
that we're
perfect.
not bashing it left, right, up and down.
They serve a good purpose. And then I think we could agree, someone that calls up that wants to buy 25,000 because they don't have any money and they want to take a trip to Europe would be different than somebody who may, let's say, want to borrow $25,000 because they want to take their home-based business and move out and hire their first employee.
Right.
Those uses of debt are significantly different and should be evaluated on their merits.
And by the way, I know you mentioned student loan debt. I did an episode a couple of weeks ago. Tampa is one of the first areas in the country to roll out within bankruptcy court a modification program, a mediation program to address student loan debt. And by the time this episode comes out, I believe that program will have started. So at least down here in the middle district of Florida, Tampa, Orlando, the center area of Florida, we're rolling out a program to schedule mediations for the purpose of trying to modify the student loan debt. And so I assume other areas of the country will be watching us to see how successful that program is. And if it's successful, to be rolling it out in other areas of the country, which I think would be a great thing, using the Chapter 13 to get control of more than just the unsecured debt. Use it to get control of any IRS debt. Use it to get control of student loan debt. Use it to get control of mortgage and car loans and other secured types of debt. So that's something that, at least here locally, we're trying to do to help with people that have too much in student loan debt. So
I think that's wonderful. Certainly the student debt problem in this country is out of control. And I think it will be addressed in one or more ways because it simply cannot continue. The amount of debt that young Americans are taking on, often not knowing what they're doing, simply cannot continue.
Well, and I think it's also, so we talked a lot when we had the mortgage meltdown, the Great Recession, back in 2009, 10, 11. I think there was plenty of blame to go around for the reason that we had so many bad mortgages, so many mortgages in default. And I think the student loan is the same type of bubble. I mean, I think there's plenty of blame to go around.
Oh, yeah.
Should students be borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a underwater basket weaving degree? Probably not. But should the schools be pricing where they're pricing to sell those things? Should the student loan companies be giving out these loans, based on the level, based on the criteria that they have? So I think it's the same kind of bubble, just from a different perspective, but it's
Sure.
the basic issue.
I agree. And it'll be interesting to see how Central Florida program kind of works out, because that may be something that gets rolled out nationwide. I could totally see that happen.
Yeah, my fear is that it gets treated the same as mortgage foreclosure mediations, which are just overblown. Did you provide your documents? My fear is that it becomes a true mediation, which is, let's find a reasonable solution to the problem, not does this round peg fit into this square hole?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So I've already got a few of these queued up in the pipeline with clients. But there are 7 wealth building rules, and I don't want to take
Yes.
the entire
No, we're
show
good.
talking about one. So the other one that appealed to me was number 3, developing a wealth building plan.
Sure. So surprise, surprise, your certified financial planner guest has a key that says you should have a plan. Not terribly shocking. But a lot of times people are focused on their career and family. And we talked off air about how we're both coaching our children in sports. So there's a lot of things that demand our time, and most of us are juggling priorities. But in handling money and trying to win with money and build wealth, you need to put together a plan. It's not often going to happen on accident. You do need to be purposeful. And to develop a wealth building plan, it's not that scary. It's not like a 85-page dissertation. But let's just start some simple things, a wealth building plan. Let's say you have a couple, they make $100,000, could be 50, could be 200,000, doesn't matter. The wealth building plan would be, okay, of our income, Sean, how much could we use to build wealth? How much has to get spent and how much could be used to build wealth? Well, let's just say it's 12,000 of 100,000, just as an example. That's 12% rate. Then the next step would be, all right, we're going to build wealth with $12,000. What should we do with that 12,000? Some of it could go into a retirement account, like a 401k, could be eligible for a match from the employer. That's one thing. Another thing, tying back to debt, could be, hey, you know, we have some credit card debt or student loan, or maybe even pay down the mortgage. You could use some of that money to pay down the mortgage. That's not investing, but if you pay down debt, that increases your wealth.
Right.
So figure out your income, figure out how much you could apply to your wealth building plan from your income, and then figure out how you want to deploy that money. Are you paying down debt, putting it in a retirement account, putting it into a fund to save for your down payment on your house, eliminating student debt? It could be just about anything that you do to increase your wealth. The way you increase your wealth is to reduce your debt and or increase your assets. So that's the basics of a wealth building plan. You can do that on a cocktail napkin, or if there's more complexity, it could be, you know, a couple of page kind of report, especially for small business owners or real estate investors that have multiple properties. But at its core, it's pretty basic. If you are always spending what you make, you're not going to be wealthy.
Right. Are you including in the plan just the wealth piece, just the piece that you focus on as the financial advisor, or are you also taking into account, well, at $100,000 salary, we can anticipate X for taxes, and then going through what is the mortgage payment and what is, you know, how much do you spend on groceries and budgeting and all that kind of stuff? Or are you focused on the investment piece?
We're focused on the wealth building piece for the most part. So in my example, Sean, what we work with clients on is mostly, you know, how much could you allocate to wealth building? If clients want us to work with them on a budget, we can do so. But generally speaking, my role is not to sit down with you and your wife and say, how much is in your entertainment budget? Do you really need to buy your kids soccer cleats? That's really left to the clients individually figure out their spending.
Okay.
I like to picture it. I'll talk about in my household with my wife and I. We've always done it this way. We have not been good budgeters. We haven't focused on that. What we focused on is we have a goal. We have some goals each year. A goal for retirement, for reducing debt, for college funds, what have you. If I achieve those macro goals, then what's left over, we could spend on whatever we want. I'm not really worried about that because I know I'm hitting my wealth building goals. So some people, if they have a spending trouble or they really don't have a handle on where their money is going, they should do a budget, work with somebody like Elliott Wealth to kind of get a handle on that. But that's not where we spend most of our time. And I'll give you another example. Most people, think about in your household, if we had a budget and we spent the entertainment budget by Friday, but then our friends unexpectedly call and say, hey, do you guys want to come out for dinner? Am I really going to tell my wife it's not in the budget? We already spent the budget? No, that's not going to happen.
So
It's not going to happen.
one of these things that I hope my wife is not listening now, we do that as well. We'll go out to dinner, and we both, neither one of us have ever been abusive on alcohol. We drink and
Sure.
and it is what it is. But it drives me crazy because we'll sit down to dinner and she'll say, "Ooh, I want to get a margarita. How much is it?" Like, honey, if we can't afford a margarita, we got bigger issues here.
Right.
If you want don't get 12 margaritas. Don't even get 2 more. Well, she's a cheap date, so she probably would be out after the first margarita. But, don't worry about how much is the margarita. Even if it's expensive, it's what, $9-10.
Sure.
Don't worry about it. Let's have fun, have the margarita. And then if we need to, cut something, so we don't go out to dinner on Sunday night because we went out for date night and had a margarita on Saturday night.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I prefer in my own life, and I think most clients, people that I have met with over my 26-year career, embrace the ideas. If we're pursuing our big goals like retirement, college funding, paying off the mortgage, eliminating debt, building up an emergency fund in the bank, if you're on your way to accomplishing those goals and you're purposeful with that, then the rest of the money, just enjoy your life and spend it. And if your wife wants to splurge and get 2 margaritas, there's no worries.
Go for it.
But if you're doing that and your debt is growing and your assets are not growing and you're living paycheck to paycheck, well, then that needs to be addressed. But focusing on the wealth building plan part frees us up to not have to worry about, should I splurge and get coffee on my way to work or not?
Right. So the last one I want to talk about, and we can talk about all 7 in general terms.
Yeah, we could talk more quickly about the others.
But the last one that I saw, the number 1, the importance of goal setting. And I think you hit on it in terms of what is the retirement goal? What is, how much debt? What is the goal for paying off the mortgage? What is the goal for paying off the student?
Sure.
What is the goal for how much we want to have in retirement? Because, Social Security may or may not be around. Who knows what that's going to do? So you need to basically save for yourself and prepare for yourself to retire.
Yes. And it's a little bit of a cliche for listeners that read self-help books or books on accumulating wealth, buying investment real estate. The idea of goals is thrown around. I'll just throw 2 things that I think are important and sometimes overlooked is write them down. Again, the financial planner is saying have a plan, write down your goals. And the second thing is think short, mid, and long-term simultaneously. The idea at, say, age 40 to say, I want to retire at 65 is a good goal, okay? Right. And the plan that you want to have enough money out there, that's also a good goal. But 25 years is an awful long time, and there's a lot of pressures and distractions. So if you only focus on the long term, it's hard to figure out what you could do today and stay interested in what you could do today and this week for something that's 25 years down the line. So the way that you complement that long-term goal is to think short-term. Go back to the wealth building plan. I want to max out my 401k this year. Or I want to put as much money in my 401k to give me the most match from my employer. I want to fund my Roth IRA this year. So those are short-term goals. And if you could achieve that short-term goal, that is putting you on the pathway to achieve that long-term goal. In my example, the 25-year retirement goal. I find that sometimes people have this long-term goal. I want to be rich. I want to retire early. They then don't follow it up with actionable, digestible things that they could do in the short and midterm that will help them carry out that goal. I had a call with somebody was introduced to me, a potential client, and she wanted to build a portfolio of real estate so she could quit her job. That's a good long-term goal. Right. But she hadn't even bought one property yet.
Right. So you're not quitting tomorrow. You got to buy that first property.
and she didn't know what type of property she wanted to buy or what the budget would be. So that's a good long-term goal. I think that's fabulous if she could achieve it and it's what she wants to do, fully supportive. But my advice to her was, don't focus on having 25 or 50 properties. Focus on what you need to do to be prepared to get your first property and do it successfully. If you could do the first one, you're on your way to 25 or 50. Is that a good example?
Yeah, no, I understand. And I do the same kind of thing. You know, I've got the long-term goals. I've got goals that I want to accomplish this year. And then I personally even break it down further than that. So I know what goals I want to accomplish in the year. And so what I'll do is every month I'll pick one of those goals and say, okay, what do I need to do this month to accomplish that goal? And then I'll even break that down. What do I need to do this week to accomplish
That's right.
in the month? And then what do I need to do today to get me closer to the weekly goal, to get me closer to the monthly goal, to get me closer to the annual goal? And it's working, and I'm hit. So I'm a huge fan of writing them down and talking about them and having people help you get there and vice versa. So, yeah.
And I know this is a little bit contrarian to a lot of the goal setting thing. You know, they'll say, picture something in the future that you want to achieve. But I'll tell you, Sean, from my 26 years of experience, if I had to choose, and you don't have to, but if I had to choose, I would give up the long-term goal setting for the short-term goal setting, as opposed to the other way around. Because if you have goals every day and you achieved your goals every day, the idea that 25 years from now, you'd look around and say, oh my God, I blew it, doesn't seem likely. But I could see having a 25-year goal and getting 24 years in and say, uh-oh.
Right. How am
I
I
got to do everything in 1 year.
Right. No, I completely agree. I think that's a good idea. So
the other goal, if I could just, the other wealth building rule that ties into this is track your progress. And you probably do this. I don't think enough people do this. And folks that are pursuing success in any endeavor, including wealth building, I think they often don't track their progress enough. So with wealth building, one of the things we work with our clients on is to set up your net worth statement. So businesses have a balance sheet. It's a list of all your assets, all your liabilities, and you figure out the value of the business by subtracting the debt from the assets.
Right.
We want to have our clients do the same thing on a personal net worth statement. And if you add up your assets, you add up your liabilities, and you track that with some regularity, it doesn't have to be every day or week. Probably most people should do it at least annually, probably semi-annually. I'm a tremendous geek. I do it every quarter. And as a quarter starts to come to a close, I start getting excited because I get to work on my own net worth statement. That's how much of a geek I am. But it's very motivational, and it gives you clarity as to whether you're winning with money or not. Because when you boil it down, there's only two things going on there. Did my assets go up, and did my debts go down? Until it gets to zero, that's the paradigm. And if you're winning with money, your net worth is going to go up. And it doesn't have to be just retirement assets. It doesn't have to just be bank money. It doesn't have to be just paying down student loans. Anything you could do to build wealth, drive the debts down, the assets up, will help you win with money. So tracking your progress with a net worth statement is a really valuable tool. And for most people, it's motivational. If you could see on just one page what's going on with your money, and then to see that unfold every 6 months where it's going higher, helps keep you on track with the goal setting.
Well, not only that, but it helps keep you on track from a mental perspective. So if you're not tracking and you have a bad month or a bad quarter, and now you start to think, oh my gosh, what's going on? Things are horrible, terrible. But what if you just had one bad month out of 12 and overall,
that's right,
your assets went up, your liabilities went down? Then that one bad month doesn't matter so much. So it is also a mindset tool, I think.
I think so. And I think it also relates to what you had said earlier in this interview with the person that owns a property and they think, well, I sell off the property, I'll pay the debt. I have a small portfolio of investment properties, residential and commercial. But when I do this every quarter, I have to assign a value and I have to look at the debt on the property if there is any. And that helps stay focused, because if you're looking and you say, oh, this property is worth 100,000, I own 97,000, and then I own this property and it's worth 180,000 and I owe 168,000. When you add those up, you'll see that you really don't have a lot of wealth.
Right.
You have a lot of property, but you don't have a lot of wealth. You don't have a lot of equity. And that should be alarming unless you have a plan to create equity over time through cash flow, through paying down the debt, increasing the value of the property, what have you. There's techniques that you can make that happen. But when you look at that on the balance sheet, it'll be very clear. I've met real estate investors where they have lots of properties, but they don't have lots of wealth.
Right.
And if you don't have lots of wealth, you know what you probably do have? Lots of risk.
Lots of risk or a lot of debt.
Yes. Yes.
So, well, cool. I want to run through the 7 real quick. So number 1, we talked about was the importance of goal setting. Number 2, preparation is key. Number 3, developing the wealth building plan, which we talked about. Number 4, you need a team. And I know that you have a great team, and I know that you are a great member of the team. So people that want to have Chris help with your wealth, he is definitely a good one to have on your team. Number 5, tracking progress, which we talked about. Number 6, the power of diversification, which again would appear to me to be pretty self-evident in terms of what portion of the portfolio is going to be the stock, which is going to be mutual funds, real estate, bonds, all the different things that you could invest in, annuities, retirement accounts, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then the last one, be careful with debt. So those are the 7 wealth building rules. So anything that we missed, anything you want to add, any closing thoughts?
No, I would just say if somebody's listening out there and some of what we talked about is unfamiliar or things that they're not doing, this is not that intimidating. If you go to a financial planner like myself, or there's many others, or you do a little research on the internet, there's lots of books. This is not that hard. So I don't want people to be overly intimidated by this. This is not something that you have to quit your job for 3 weeks to focus on, but these are good guideposts. So if you haven't adopted one or more of these, take a look at doing so. If you go to my website, elliottwealth.com, we'll do a free consultation with you, complimentary. We could talk about how we could help you win with money. So if you're not a client of ours, and many of your listeners or all of your listeners are not, please check us out. We'd love to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely. And I would also add, those of you that have spouses, don't be afraid to have this conversation with your spouse. You may find that working on this together actually helps in the relationship. So I would say to reach out to Chris, let him know. Again, it's Elliott Wealth, ELLIOTT Wealth, WEALTH, elliottwealth.com. And then Chris's email is Calandra, CCALANDRA @elliottwealth.com, spelled the same way. So I think that does it for this week's episode.
Great.
Chris, thank you again for being, I think this is what, your 3rd time?
I think so. And I have to have you join me on my my podcast. I have a few things I'd like to kick around with you. So I'll turn the tables on you sometime soon. All right.
Absolutely. Sounds good. And you are welcome to come back for a 4th time, a 5th time, whatever. You are welcome to come back. So,
all right. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Thank you. And I think I'm going to wrap up the episode with that. And so let's see if I can get this right, because I keep stumbling over it, but luckily I get to edit out the stumbles. So I hope that at the end of the month, you have more money, and at the end of the money, you don't have more month. So with that, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the podcast, and we will catch you next week on the Crushing Debt podcast. Okay, so that is stopped. And then let me stop Zoom.